The gunshot echoed through the marble courthouse like thunder splitting stone. Blood spread across the polished floor that Daniel Carter had cleaned just hours before. The billionaire CEO lay gasping behind him alive only because a janitor, a nobody in everyone's eyes, had thrown himself into death's path. As sirens wailed and chaos erupted, Daniel pressed his hand against the burning wound in his shoulder, thinking not of glory or reward, but of his daughter Lily's face. If you're watching from New York, London, or anywhere between, stay with me because what happened next changed everything. The courthouse at 4 a.m. was a cathedral of shadows and silence. Daniel Carter pushed his industrial mop bucket down the endless corridor, its wheels squeaking a lonely rhythm that echoed off marble walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced judges. Each portrait seemed to look down at him with the same expression, unseeing, uncaring, unaware that he even existed. Daniel had been invisible his whole life, and he'd made peace with that fact long ago. His reflection caught in the freshly polished floor a ghost of a man at 38 shoulders, slightly stooped from years of physical labor, hands rough in calloused uniform bearing the name Dan in faded embroidery. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes that his daughter Lily had inherited, still held a spark of something unbreakable. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just stubborn refusal to surrender. Another glamorous night at the palace, he muttered to himself, wringing out the mop with practiced efficiency. The irony wasn't lost on him here. He was cleaning the halls where justice was supposedly served, while his own life felt like one long sentence of hard labor. The courthouse was Daniel's second job. From 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. he cleaned these halls. From 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. he worked at a warehouse across town loading trucks until his back screamed. Then home to Lily, homework dinner from a box bedtime stories, and if he was lucky 4 hours of sleep before starting again. He paused at the water fountain to refill his bucket, catching sight of the newspaper someone had left behind. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Hayes Pharmaceutical Trial Continues, CEO Claims Innocence in Drug Scandal." Victor Hayes. Even the name tasted bitter in Daniel's mouth. Everyone in the city knew about Hayes Pharmaceutical. They developed a revolutionary heart medication called Cardizine 5 years ago, marketed as the miracle drug for cardiac patients. The only problem? It cost $3,000 a month, and insurance companies had found every excuse to deny coverage. Worse reports had surfaced about fatal side effects that the company had allegedly hidden during trials. Daniel knew all about Cardizine. Lily needed it to live. He crumpled the newspaper and tossed it in the trash, trying to push down the familiar surge of anger. Anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. Anger didn't pay bills or buy medicine, or keep his daughter's heart beating steadily through the night. "Daddy, why do some people have so much when others have so little?" Lily had asked him last week, her wise beyond her years eyes studying him over her homework. "I don't know, sweetheart," he'd answered honestly. "But what matters isn't what we have, it's what we do with it. Like how you always share your sandwich with Mr. Rodriguez at work, even though we don't have much, exactly like that." She'd smiled then, that radiant smile that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Lily was the reason he got up every morning, the reason he endured the aching joints and the endless exhaustion. She'd been born with a congenital heart defect, hypoplastic left heart syndrome, the doctors called it. 3 surgeries before her 5th birthday. Monthly medications that cost more than he made in 3 months. Regular checkups with specialists who looked at him with barely concealed pity when he asked about payment plans. But Lily was a fighter just like her old man, and as long as she kept fighting, so would he. The morning wore on and Daniel methodically worked his way through the building. The judge's chambers on the 3rd floor where decisions affecting thousands were made daily. The jury deliberation rooms where ordinary citizens wrestled with extraordinary responsibilities. The holding cells in the basement where hope went to die. He was mopping the main courtroom, Courtroom A, the big one where they held the high-profile cases, when he heard voices in the hallway. It was 6:30 a.m., too early for anyone to be here except security and maintenance. "I don't care what the polls say," a man's voice said, sharp and dismissive. "We stick to the strategy. Emphasize the FDA approval, downplay the pricing structure, and for God's sake make sure that widow doesn't testify." Daniel recognized the voice from the news. Marcus Webb, Victor Hayes, lead attorney. $5,000 suits and a reputation for getting the guilty off scot-free. But sir, another voice protested, younger, nervous. The Park testimony could sway the jury. His wife's death was directly linked to, allegedly linked. Allegedly. That's why we have expert witnesses to muddy the waters, create doubt. That's all we need. Their voices faded as they moved past, but Daniel had heard enough. Andrew Park, he'd read about him, lost his wife Sarah 6 months ago. She'd been taking Cardizine for a year when she suddenly collapsed. The autopsy showed liver failure, a known but undisclosed side effect of the drug. Park had become the face of the victims' families demanding justice, not just for his wife, but for dozens of others who'd suffered. Daniel returned to his mopping, but his mind wandered to what it must be like to lose someone you love to corporate greed. He couldn't imagine life without Lily. She was all he had left after Maria died in childbirth, a tragedy that had nearly broken him until he'd held his daughter for the first time and realized he had to be strong for her. By 7:45 a.m., the courthouse was beginning to wake up. Lawyers in expensive suits rushed past without seeing him. Court clerks chatted about their weekend plans. Security guards nodded in his direction, the only acknowledgement he usually received. Daniel was gathering his supplies when Judge Margaret Sloan swept past. Unlike the others, she paused, actually looking at him. "Daniel, isn't it?" she said, her voice carrying the authority of 20 years on the bench. "Yes, ma'am." He was surprised she knew his name. "You do good work. This place has never been cleaner." She studied him with sharp gray eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst. "You have a daughter, don't you? I've seen you in the pediatric ward at St. Mary's." Daniel's cheeks flushed. "Yes, ma'am. Lily. She's 8. Heart condition." He nodded, unsure why one of the city's most powerful judges was taking an interest in his personal life. Judge Sloan's expression softened slightly. "My grandson has cystic fibrosis. I know what it's like to watch a child struggle with illness, to feel helpless despite all your power and position." She paused, seeming to weigh her words. "If you ever need anything, Daniel, legal advice, a recommendation, my door is open." Before he could respond, she was gone, her black robes billowing behind her like wings. Daniel changed out of his uniform in the basement locker room, trading it for the worn jeans and t-shirt he wore to the warehouse. His shoulder ached, an old injury from his construction days that acted up when the weather changed. The forecast called for storms later. Perfect. He was heading for the exit when he noticed the crowd gathering outside courtroom A. Reporters with cameras, protesters with signs reading, "Hayes kills," and "Justice for Sarah Park." The trial was starting early today. Through the glass doors of the courtroom, Daniel caught a glimpse of the man himself, Victor Hayes. 62 years old, silver-haired, immaculately groomed, sitting at the defendant's table like he was at a board meeting rather than on trial for criminal negligence. His expression was one of mild annoyance, as if this whole affair was an inconvenient interruption to his golf schedule. Then Daniel saw Andrew Park. The widower sat in the gallery's front row, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He was younger than Daniel had expected, maybe 35, with the hollow eyes of someone who'd forgotten what sleep felt like. His suit was off the rack, probably the only one he owned. He stared at Hayes with an intensity that made Daniel uncomfortable even from across the room. That kind of grief, that kind of rage, it could drive a man to do terrible things. Daniel shook off the thought and headed for the exit. He had his own problems to worry about. The warehouse supervisor had been making noises about cutbacks, and he was always the first to be let go. Last in, first out, they called it. Never mind that he worked harder than guys half his age. Never mind that he never complained, never called in sick, never asked for special treatment. The warehouse was exactly what you'd expect, a massive concrete box filled with boxes, forklifts beeping their warnings, men shouting over the din of machinery. Daniel clocked in and got to work loading trucks with everything from electronics to furniture to mysterious packages labeled only with tracking numbers. "Yo, Dan," his coworker Miguel called out. "You see the game last night?" "Didn't catch it," Daniel replied, hefting a box marked fragile with the care most people reserved for newborns. "Lily had homework." "Man, you need a life outside that kid." "She is my life." Miguel shook his head but smiled. "You're a good dad, hermano. Better than most. The morning dragged on. Lift, carry, stack, repeat. Daniel's mind kept drifting back to the courthouse, to Andrew Park's haunted eyes and Victor Hayes' indifference. How could two men exist in the same world, yet be so far apart? One destroyed by loss, the other untouched by the destruction he'd caused. During his lunch break, 15 minutes in the loading dock eating a peanut butter sandwich he'd made at 3 a.m., Daniel checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Lily's school. His heart stopped. He called back immediately, handshaking as he held the phone. Mr. Carter, this is Nurse Patricia at Washington Elementary. Lily had an episode during gym class. She's stable now, but I'm on my way. Daniel didn't even clock out, just ran to his beat-up Honda Civic and drove like the devil was chasing him. The school was 20 minutes away in good traffic. He made it in 12. Lily was in the nurse's office, lying on the narrow cot, her face pale but her breathing steady. She smiled when she saw him. Hi, Daddy. I'm okay. Hey, sweetheart. He knelt beside her, taking her small hand in his rough one. What happened? I was running and my chest felt funny, like butterflies were having a party in there. Mrs. Patterson made me stop and brought me here. The nurse, a kind woman in her 50s, pulled Daniel aside. Her heart rate spiked to 180. It came down on its own, but Mr. Carter, she needs to see her cardiologist. This is the 3rd episode this month. I know. We have an appointment next week. What he didn't say was that he'd already rescheduled it twice because he couldn't afford the copay. What he didn't say was that Lily's medication was running low and he was rationing it, giving her half doses to make it last. What he didn't say was that he was failing the one person who mattered most. Can I go back to class? Lily asked hopefully. Not today, baby. We're going home. She pouted, but didn't argue. Daniel signed her out, his signature shaky on the release form. As they walked to the car, Lily slipped her hand into his. Daddy, am I expensive? The question hit him like a physical blow. What? No, sweetheart. Why would you ask that? I heard Mrs. Patterson talking to another teacher. She said she didn't know how you managed with all my medical bills. Am I why you work 2 jobs? Daniel stopped walking and knelt in front of his daughter, looking her straight in the eyes. Listen to me, Lily Carter. You are not expensive. You are priceless. You are worth more than all the money in the world. I work because that's what dads do. We take care of our families, and I would work 10 jobs if that's what it took to keep you healthy and happy. Understand? She nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. Worry no 8-year-old should carry. They spent the afternoon at home, Lily resting on the couch while Daniel did laundry and pretended not to be terrified. He called the warehouse, explaining the situation. His supervisor was less than sympathetic. This is the 4th time this month you've left early, Carter? My daughter was sick. She has a heart condition. Yeah, well, I've got a business to run. One more time and we'll have to reevaluate your position. Daniel wanted to scream to rage against the unfairness of it all. Instead, he said, I understand, and hung up. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills. No matter how many times he ran the numbers, they didn't add up. Rent $200. Utilities $200. Food $400. Lily's medication $500, with the insurance that barely covered anything. Doctor visits $300. Car payment $200. Gas $150. Total monthly expenses $2,950. Total monthly income $2,800. He was drowning and he couldn't see the surface anymore. The next morning, another 4 a.m. start. Daniel moved through the courthouse like a zombie. His body performed the familiar motions while his mind spiraled through increasingly desperate scenarios. A 3rd job. But when would he sleep? When would he see Lily sell the car? But how would he get to work, move to a cheaper apartment? They were already in the worst part of town. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the commotion in courtroom A. Raised voices, a woman crying, security guards moving quickly but not quite running. Daniel peered through the door's window. The trial was in session earlier than usual. Victor Hayes sat at the defendant's table, his lawyer speaking passionately about unfortunate but unforeseeable complications and the price of medical innovation. In the gallery, Andrew Park was on his feet being restrained by a bailiff. Lies, Park shouted. You killed her. You killed my Sarah for profit. She trusted you. We trusted you. Judge Sloan banged her gavel. Mr. Park, you will control yourself or be removed from this courtroom. I've lost everything. Park's voice broke. My wife, my future, everything. And he sits there in his $1,000 suit like none of it matters. Hayes turned to look at Park. Then and Daniel saw something in the billionaire's eyes that made his blood run cold. Not guilt, not remorse. Annoyance, like Park was a fly buzzing around his head. Your Honor, Hayes' lawyer said smoothly, perhaps Mr. Park needs time to compose himself. This is clearly very emotional for him. The condescension in his tone was like salt in a wound. Daniel saw Park's face contort with rage and pain. I'll show you emotional, Park muttered, reaching into his jacket. Time slowed to a crawl. The gun appeared in Park's hand, a small revolver, probably a .38. Someone screamed. Security guards reached for their weapons but were too far away. Hayes froze, his arrogant expression finally cracking to show fear. Judge Sloan dove behind her bench, and Daniel, without thinking, dropped his mop and ran. He burst through the courtroom doors just as Park raised the gun, aiming it directly at Hayes' chest. The distance was maybe 20 feet, impossible to miss at that range. No! Daniel shouted, his voice echoing through the courtroom. Park hesitated just for a second, his tear-filled eyes meeting Daniel's. In that second, Daniel saw himself. He saw every desperate parent who'd watched their child suffer. He saw every working man crushed by medical debt. He saw the rage of the powerless against the powerful. But he also saw Lily's face. He saw her question, why do some people have so much when others have so little? And he knew what his answer had to be. Don't do this, Daniel said, moving toward Park with his hands raised. I know you're hurting, God, I know, but this isn't the way. You don't understand, Park sobbed, the gun shaking in his grip. She was everything. Sarah was my whole world. We were trying to have kids. We had names picked out. And he took that from me. From us. For money. I understand more than you know, Daniel said softly, still moving forward. My daughter has a heart condition. She needs medication to live, medication his company makes. Medication I can barely afford. Some months I have to choose between her pills and food. So yeah, I understand wanting to hurt him. He was close now, maybe 10 feet from Park. The gun swung between him and Hayes. Then why, Park asked desperately, why are you stopping me? Because my daughter needs me to be someone she can be proud of, Daniel said. Because taking a life, even his life, won't bring your Sarah back. It'll just create more pain. And because, he took a breath knowing how insane his next words would sound, because even his life has value, even if he can't see the value in ours. That's beautiful, Park said bitterly. Really beautiful. But you're wrong. Some people don't deserve to live. Some people are cancers, and you have to cut them out. The gun steadied, aimed again at Hayes. Daniel had one chance, one moment to decide who he was going to be. He thought of Lily asleep in her bed, trusting that her daddy would come home. He thought of Sarah Park dead at 32 because a company decided profits mattered more than people. He thought of Victor Hayes, who would never learn, never change, never care. And he thought of something his own father had told him once before the cancer took him. Danny, the measure of a man isn't in how he treats his friends. It's in how he treats his enemies. Anyone can be kind to those who are kind to them. It takes real strength to show mercy to those who deserve none. Daniel moved, not toward Park, but between him and Hayes. Then you'll have to shoot me first, he said simply. Park's eyes widened. Move. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, with all of us, every person in this room, in this city, who's been hurt by greed and indifference. But if we meet violence with violence, hatred with hatred, we become the very thing we're fighting against. Get out of the way! Park screamed, tears streaming down his face. I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want you to hurt anyone, Daniel replied, including yourself. Because that's what this will do, destroy you. Sarah wouldn't want this. You know she wouldn't. For a moment, just a moment, Park's expression softened. The gun lowered slightly. Then Victor Hayes, in a moment of spectacular stupidity, spoke. Listen to him, Park. Put the gun down before you make things worse for yourself. You're already looking at assault charges. Don't add murder to it. His tone was patronizing, dismissive, the tone of a man who'd never faced a real consequence in his life. Park's face contorted with fresh rage. The gun came up fast, aimed at Hayes' head. Daniel didn't think. He just moved. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space, like the world cracking open. Pain exploded through Daniel's shoulder as the bullet tore through flesh and muscle. He spun with the impact, crashing into Hayes and taking them both to the ground. Blood. So much blood spreading across the polished floor he'd cleaned just hours ago. Screams and shouts filled the air, but they seemed distant, muffled. Daniel's vision swam. He saw Park drop the gun, horror replacing rage on his face. He saw security guards swarming, tackling Park to the ground. He saw Judge Sloan emerging from behind her bench, shouting orders. And he saw Victor Hayes inches from his face, eyes wide with shock. "Why?" Hayes whispered. "Why would you save me?" Daniel tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The pain was everything now, a fire burning through his shoulder and chest. He thought of Lily, wondered if she'd eaten breakfast, if she'd taken her half-dose of medication, if she'd know how much he loved her. Because, he finally managed, his voice barely a whisper, "My daughter needs me to be someone she's proud of. And because your life matters too, even if you've forgotten that other lives matter." The last thing he saw before the darkness claimed him was Hayes' face, and for the first time there was something almost human in those cold eyes. Something that might have been shame. Then nothing. Daniel woke to the steady beep of machines and the antiseptic smell of hospital. His shoulder was immobilized, wrapped in enough bandages to supply a small army. An IV dripped steadily into his arm. "Daddy!" He turned his head, a motion that sent lightning through his shoulder, and saw Lily sitting in a chair beside his bed. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling. "Hey, sweetheart," he croaked, his throat dry as sand. "You're a hero," she said simply. "It's on the news. You saved someone's life." "I'm no hero, baby. Just a dad who wanted to come home to his daughter." "The man you saved came to see you," Lily said. "While you were sleeping. He seemed sad." Daniel couldn't imagine Victor Hayes being sad about anything except a drop in stock prices, but he kept that thought to himself. A nurse entered, a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "Mr. Carter, you're awake. How's the pain?" "Manageable." He lied. She didn't buy it, but didn't push. "You have visitors, quite a few actually, but I can send them away if you're not up for it." Daniel was about to refuse when Lily piped up. "The judge lady is here. She seems nice." Judge Sloan. Daniel couldn't imagine why she'd visit him. "Send her in, I guess." The judge entered, and Daniel barely recognized her. Gone was the austere figure in black robes. In their place was a woman in a simple blazer and slacks, looking older and more tired than he'd ever seen her. "Mr. Carter," she said, then paused. "Daniel, how are you feeling?" "Like I was shot," he said, attempting humor. She didn't smile. "What you did today was extraordinary. Foolish, perhaps, but extraordinary. Anyone would have—" "No," she interrupted. "Anyone would not have. Most people would have run or frozen or simply watched. You acted. You put yourself between a gun and a man who, frankly, many people believe deserved whatever Mr. Park intended to do to him." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, wincing at the pain. "Nobody deserves to be shot in cold blood, Your Honor. Not even Victor Hayes." "You believe that even knowing what his company has done, what they've done to your own daughter—" Daniel looked at Lily, who was listening with rapt attention. "Especially knowing that, if I let anger and revenge guide my actions, what am I teaching her? That violence solves problems, that some people deserve to die because we disagree with them, or because they've hurt us. That's not the world I want her to grow up in." Judge Sloan studied him for a long moment. "You're either the most principled man I've ever met, or the most naive." "Probably both," Daniel admitted. "The trial has been postponed," she said. "Mr. Park is being held on attempted murder charges. He's broken. Completely broken. His lawyer is pushing for temporary insanity." "He's not insane," Daniel said quietly. "He's just in pain. More pain than any person should have to bear. You're defending the man who shot you. I'm understanding him. There's a difference. Judge Sloan shook her head in wonder. Mr. Carter, I've been on the bench for 20 years. I've seen the worst of humanity parade through my courtroom. I'd become cynical, I suppose. Hardened. I'd forgotten that there are still good people in this world, people who do the right thing not for reward or recognition, but simply because it's right. You reminded me of that today. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. This isn't charity, so don't even think about refusing it. It's a job offer, court officer position, full benefits including comprehensive health insurance. The salary is double what you're making at your 2 jobs combined. Daniel stared at the envelope, unable to process what he was hearing. I don't have any experience in law enforcement. You have something better, integrity and courage. The rest can be taught. She stood to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Hayes asked me to give you this. She handed him a second envelope, thicker than the first. Daniel opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note in elegant handwriting. This is not charity either, Mr. Carter. Consider it a small attempt at balancing the scales. Your daughter's medical expenses are also being covered indefinitely. It's the least I can do for the man who saved my life, and perhaps my soul. V. Hayes. Daniel stared at the check, tears blurring his vision. Lily climbed onto the bed, carefully wrapping her small arms around him. Does this mean I can take full doses of my medicine? She asked in a small voice. Daniel hugged her tight, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. Yeah, baby, it means a lot more than that. Judge Sloan smiled, the first genuine smile Daniel had ever seen from her. The world needs more Daniel Carters, she said, and it's about time the Daniel Carters of the world caught a break. After she left, Daniel and Lily sat in comfortable silence. The sun was setting outside the hospital window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily was doing her homework, tongue poking out in concentration. Daniel watched her, marveling at her resilience, her strength, her pure heart. Daddy, she said without looking up from her math problems. Yeah, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words were worth more than any check, any job offer, any recognition. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next few days passed in a blur of visitors, medical checks, and media attention that Daniel desperately tried to avoid. Reporters wanted to interview the hero janitor, but Daniel refused them all. This wasn't about fame or glory. It never had been. Andrew Park's wife's sister came to see him, a quiet woman named Helen, who looked like she'd aged a decade in the past 6 months. I wanted to thank you, she said, standing awkwardly by his bed, for stopping Andrew. He's not a bad man. Grief just broke something in him. I know, Daniel said. I've seen grief. I've felt it. It can make us do things we never thought ourselves capable of. The thing is, Helen continued, Sarah would have been horrified. She was the gentlest soul. She rescued injured birds, cried at commercials, always saw the good in people. Even when she was dying, she made Andrew promise not to be bitter. He couldn't keep that promise. Grief doesn't follow timelines or make promises, Daniel said gently. He loved her. That love just got twisted into something dark. Helen nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. You saved 2 lives that day, Mr. Carter. Victor Hayes, obviously, but also Andrew's. If he'd killed Hayes, it would have destroyed him. Whatever happens now, at least he has a chance at redemption. After she left, Daniel lay thinking about redemption, about second chances, about the thin line between justice and revenge. He thought about Victor Hayes, wondered if the man was capable of change, or if his gesture was just guilt money, a rich man's way of buying absolution. His answer came the next day. Victor Hayes entered the hospital room like he was entering a board meeting, controlled, composed, expensive suit, impeccable. But there was something different about his eyes. The cold arrogance was gone, replaced by something Daniel couldn't quite identify. Mr. Carter, Hayes began, then stopped. For perhaps the first time in his life, the billionaire seemed at a loss for words. Mr. Hayes, Daniel acknowledged, unsure what to make of this visit. Hayes took the chair Lily usually occupied, looking uncomfortable in the cheap plastic seat. I need to ask you something, he finally said. Why did you really save me? The truth. Not what you told the media. or the judge? Daniel considered lying, giving him some noble answer about the sanctity of life, but something in Hayes' expression demanded honesty. Because I was tired, Daniel said simply. Hayes blinked. Tired. Tired of the anger, tired of the hatred, tired of watching the world tear itself apart over money and power and things that won't matter when we're dead. I've spent years being angry at people like you, Mr. Hayes, angry at the system that lets you charge desperate families thousands for medicine that costs pennies to produce, angry at a world where my daughter's life is worth less than your profit margin. Hayes flinched but didn't interrupt. But you know what? That anger was killing me just as surely as any bullet. It was poisoning me, making me bitter, turning me into someone I didn't want my daughter to see. So when I saw Andrew Park with that gun, I saw myself. I saw every desperate parent, every grieving spouse, every person crushed by circumstances beyond their control, and I realized I had a choice. A choice, Hayes prompted. I could let the anger win, let you die, let Park destroy his life, let the cycle of violence and vengeance continue. Or I could choose something else. I could choose to believe that even you, Mr. Hayes, are capable of change. That maybe looking down the barrel of that gun might have shown you what really matters. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller somehow, more human. I have 2 children, he said. David and Monica, 28 and 25. They haven't spoken to me in 3 years, said I'd become someone they didn't recognize, someone who valued money over lives. He laughed bitterly. I told them they didn't understand business, that the pharmaceutical industry was complex, that someone had to make the hard decisions. And now I realize they were right. I'd become a monster, not overnight, but slowly, decision by decision, compromise by compromise. Each time choosing profit over people, telling myself it was for the greater good, that the money would fund more research, help more people in the long run. He looked directly at Daniel. Do you know what I thought when Park pulled that gun? Daniel shook his head. I thought about my children. Not my company, not my legacy, not my money. I thought about David and Monica and how they'd remember me as the father who chose wealth over everything else, who let a woman die rather than reduce profit margins, who became exactly the kind of man I'd once sworn I'd never be. It's not too late, Daniel said quietly. You're still alive. You still have choices. Hayes stood abruptly, walked to the window. The city sprawled below, millions of lives in motion, each with their own struggles and triumphs. I'm dropping my legal defense, he said suddenly, accepting responsibility. There will be penalties, possibly prison time. Daniel's eyes widened. That's a big decision. It's the right decision, something I haven't made in a very long time. Hayes turned back to face him. I'm also restructuring the company, capping medication prices at affordable levels, creating a fund for families who can't afford treatment. It'll cost billions. The board will try to stop me. Shareholders will revolt. Why tell me this? Because you saved more than my life, Mr. Carter. You saved my soul, if such a thing exists. You showed me that there are still people who choose goodness even when every circumstance argues against it. People who see others' pain and try to ease it rather than profit from it. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Your daughter Lily, I'd like to meet her properly sometime, when you're recovered. I want to apologize to her, to all the children whose parents have struggled because of my greed. She'd like that, Daniel said, meaning it. She asks hard questions, though. Be prepared. Hayes actually smiled, a real genuine smile that transformed his face. I look forward to it. Hard questions are exactly what I need. After he left, Daniel lay back, processing the conversation. Could people really change? Could a man who'd spent decades choosing profit over people suddenly develop a conscience? He didn't know. But he'd learned something in that courtroom. Sometimes, you had to have faith in the possibility of redemption, even when all evidence suggested otherwise. The recovery was harder than Daniel had anticipated. 3 weeks after the shooting, he was still struggling with basic movements, his shoulder protesting every attempt at normalcy. The physical therapy sessions were torture, but Lily came to everyone cheering him on like he was competing in the Olympics rather than just trying to lift his arm above his head. Come on, Daddy. You can do it. Just like when you taught me to ride a bike, one more try? The physical therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, smiled at Lily's enthusiasm. Your daughter's a better motivator than I am, Mr. Carter. She's had practice, Daniel grunted, pushing through another repetition. Been motivating me since the day she was born. What he didn't mention was how the tables had turned lately. Since the shooting, since the job offer, since Hayes's check cleared, Lily had been different. Not bad different, but lighter. The weight she'd carried that no 8-year-old should carry, about being expensive, about being a burden, had lifted. She laughed more. She ran during recess without fear. She took her full dose of medication every morning without the guilty look that used to break Daniel's heart. Mr. Carter, Brenda said after Lily had skipped off to get a juice box from the vending machine. I need to be honest with you. The damage to your shoulder is significant. You'll regain most of your mobility, but there will always be weakness. Pain. You won't be able to do the kind of physical labor you used to. Good thing I got a desk job lined up then, Daniel said, trying for humor. Court officer isn't exactly a desk job. You'll need to be able to physically intervene if necessary. Restraint situations removing disruptive individuals. I'll manage, Daniel said firmly. I've been managing my whole life. That afternoon, Judge Sloan visited again. She'd been coming regularly, bringing case files for him to study, teaching him about court procedures and protocols. Today, though, she had a different kind of lesson. Andrew Park's trial is next week, she said without preamble. He's been denied bail flight risk and potential danger to himself. His lawyer is pushing for a mental health evaluation. Good, Daniel said. He needs help, not just punishment. The prosecutor wants you to testify. Daniel had been expecting this, dreading it. What would I even say that he shot me? Everyone knows that. They want you to describe the impact, the trauma, the ongoing challenges. They want to paint Park as a dangerous man who needs to be locked away for a long time. But that's not who he is, Daniel protested. He's a grieving husband who snapped. One moment of desperation shouldn't define his entire life. Judge Sloan studied him carefully. You know most victims want maximum punishment for their attackers. I'm not most victims. And honestly, I don't even see myself as a victim. I made a choice to step in front of that gun. Park didn't choose to lose his wife. Hayes didn't initially choose to become corrupted by greed. It happened slowly, one compromise at a time. We're all just people trying to navigate an impossible world. That's a very generous view of humanity. Maybe. Or maybe I just know what it's like to be desperate, to feel like the whole world is against you, like you're drowning and nobody cares. He thought of all those nights calculating bills, all those half doses of Lily's medication, all that quiet desperation. If circumstances had been slightly different, if Lily had died because I couldn't afford her medication, I don't know what I might have done. Judge Sloan was quiet for a moment. You're going to make an interesting court officer, Daniel Carter. Most come in thinking in black and white, guilty or innocent, right or wrong. You already understand that justice is painted in shades of gray. Is that a good thing? In my courtroom, it's essential. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. David Hayes Victor's son stood in the doorway looking uncomfortable and uncertain. He had his father's sharp features but softer eyes, wearing jeans and a Columbia University sweatshirt rather than a designer suit. Mr. Carter, I'm David Hayes. I needed to thank you. Daniel gestured to the chair. No thanks necessary, really. No, there is. David sat down, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that made him look younger than his 28 years. You saved my father's life, but more than that, you gave him back to us. To me and my sister. I don't understand. Dad called us the night after the shooting. First time in 3 years. He was crying. I'd never heard him cry before, not even when Mom died. He apologized. Not the corporate non-apology he'd perfected, but really apologized. Said he'd lost his way, forgotten what mattered. Said a janitor named Daniel had reminded him that every life has value. Daniel felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what felt right. You did what nobody else would have done. You saw my father, who most people consider a monster, as a human being worth saving. Do you have any idea how rare that is? He's trying to change, Daniel offered. That takes courage. David laughed, but it wasn't bitter. He's doing more than trying. He's liquidating his personal assets to fund the victim's compensation fund. He's testifying against his own company's practices. The board is trying to force him out, but he's fighting them. He says he has nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Everything. His soul, he says, and maybe his children's respect. David paused. I'm going to the trial tomorrow, Park's trial. My father wanted to go to face him, but his lawyers advised against it. Probably wise, Daniel agreed. Park doesn't need to see him right now. Will you be there? I have to testify, though I'm not sure what I'll say. David stood to leave, then turned back. Say the truth. That's all any of us can do. That evening, Lily was doing homework at his bedside while Daniel reviewed more court procedures. She was working on an essay about heroes, and she kept glancing at him with a look he couldn't quite read. What is it, sweetheart? Mrs. Johnson says I should write about you, about how you're a hero. And what do you think? She chewed on her pencil, thinking. I don't think you're a hero the way Superman is a hero. You didn't want to get shot. You were scared. Terrified, Daniel admitted. But you did it anyway, because it was the right thing to do. Mrs. Johnson says that's actually braver than not being scared at all. Mrs. Johnson sounds smart. She also says heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear janitor uniforms. Daniel felt his eyes burn with unshed tears. What are you going to write? The truth, Lily said, simply echoing David Hayes. That my dad is just a regular person who tries to do good things, and that maybe that's the best kind of hero, the kind other regular people can try to be too. The day of Andrew Park's trial arrived gray and drizzling, matching the mood of everyone involved. Daniel's shoulder ached worse than usual. The weather Brenda had warned him would always affect it now. He dressed carefully in his only suit, the one he'd worn to Maria's funeral 9 years ago. Lily helped him with his tie, her small fingers steady and sure. You look handsome, Daddy. Thanks, baby. You sure you're okay staying with Mrs. Rodriguez? She's teaching me to make empanadas. I'll save you some. Daniel kissed her forehead, inhaling her strawberry shampoo scent, grounding himself in this moment of normalcy before heading into the storm. The courthouse was surrounded by media vans and protesters. Some carried signs supporting Park, grief is not a crime, and Hayes killed Sarah Park. Others demanded justice for the attempted murder. Daniel slipped in through the employee entrance, his temporary court officer badge getting him past security. The courtroom was packed. He saw Helen Sarah Park's sister in the front row. David Hayes sat in the back, trying to be inconspicuous. Judge Sloan presided, her expression carefully neutral. And there was Andrew Park, looking smaller than Daniel remembered. Prison had not been kind to him. He'd lost weight, his suit hanging loose on his frame. His eyes were hollow-haunted, but when they met Daniel's across the room, there was something else there. Gratitude, perhaps. Or maybe just recognition, one broken man acknowledging another. The prosecutor, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Winters, called Daniel to the stand first. After the preliminaries name-occupation relationship to the incident, she got to the heart of it. Mr. Carter, can you describe what happened on the morning of September 15th? Daniel took a breath. I was finishing my shift cleaning the courthouse. I saw Mr. Park pull a gun and aim it at Mr. Hayes. I intervened. You intervened by placing yourself between the gun and Mr. Hayes? Yes. Why would you do that? You didn't know either man personally. This was the moment Daniel had been dreading and anticipating, the moment to choose his words carefully. Because I saw a man in pain about to do something that would destroy multiple lives, including his own. I thought I could help. Winters frowned. This wasn't the answer she wanted. Mr. Park shot you. You could have died. But I didn't. You have permanent damage to your shoulder, chronic pain. Your life has been irrevocably changed. Yes, Daniel agreed. Changed for the better in many ways. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Winters looked frustrated. Mr. Carter, are you saying being shot was a positive experience? I'm saying that sometimes terrible events can lead to positive changes. Mr. Hayes has reformed his company's practices. Thousands of families will have access to affordable medication because of what happened that day, my own daughter included. So you're defending the man who shot you? Daniel looked directly at Andrew Park. I'm acknowledging that he's a human being who experienced unbearable loss and made a terrible decision in a moment of overwhelming grief. I don't defend the action, but I understand the pain behind it. Winters tried several more approaches, but Daniel remained consistent. Yes, Park had shot him. Yes, it was wrong. But no, he didn't want to see Park's life destroyed. The defense attorney, a public defender named Marcus Thompson, who looked overwhelmed but determined, approached for cross-examination. Mr. Carter, you mentioned your daughter has a heart condition. Yes, hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And she requires medication manufactured by Hayes Pharmaceutical. Yes. Medication you struggle to afford. Yes. So you had every reason to hate Victor Hayes, to want to see him harmed. I had every reason to be angry, Daniel corrected. But anger and hatred are choices. I chose differently. Even though that choice nearly cost you your life. Especially because of that. My daughter doesn't need a father consumed by hatred. She needs someone who shows her that kindness is possible even in the darkest moments. Thompson nodded, seeming satisfied. No further questions. As Daniel left the stand, he passed Andrew Park. On impulse, he stopped. I forgive you, he said quietly, but loud enough for the court reporter to hear. I hope you can forgive yourself. Park broke down, then sobbing into his hands. His lawyer tried to comfort him, but the tears wouldn't stop. Judge Sloan called a recess, and Daniel escaped to the hallway, his legs shaking. Helen found him there, sitting on a bench, trying to compose himself. That was extraordinary, she said, sitting beside him. Sarah would have been so grateful. She always believed in forgiveness and second chances. Even when the cancer was destroying her body, she never became bitter. Tell me about her, Daniel said. Not the victim from the news stories, the real person. Helen smiled through her tears. She was a kindergarten teacher. Can you imagine 5-year-olds all day, and she loved every minute? She'd come home covered in finger paint and glitter, talking about how little Tommy had finally learned to tie his shoes, or how Sarah, another Sarah, had shared her snack with the new kid. She saw the best in everyone. She sounds wonderful. She was. And you know what? She would have stepped in front of that gun too. To save anyone, even Victor Hayes. It's just who she was. Maybe that's why I did it, Daniel said thoughtfully. Not for Hayes, but for all the Sarah Parks of the world, to prove that their kindness isn't weakness, that their compassion matters. The trial resumed and Daniel stayed to watch. Other witnesses testified: the security guards who'd been too far away, the court clerk who'd hidden under her desk, the bailiff who'd tackled Park after the shooting. Each painted a picture of chaos and terror, of a moment when violence had shattered the supposed safety of the courtroom. Then Victor Hayes himself took the stand. He looked different from the man Daniel had seen in the hospital, older somehow, more worn, but also more present, more real. Mr. Hayes? Winters began, clearly uncomfortable with her star witness. You were the intended victim of Mr. Park's attack. I was the intended target, Hayes corrected. But we were all victims. Mr. Park lost his wife. Mr. Carter was shot. Dozens of people were traumatized. And yes, I experienced the terror of facing my own mortality. But victim, no. If anything, I was a catalyst for tragedy. Winters looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Park tried to kill you. Yes, and I understand why. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Judge Sloan raised an eyebrow but didn't intervene. You understand why Swum? Winters pressed. My company's medication, which Mrs. Park was taking, has a known side effect of liver damage in a small percentage of patients. We knew this. We buried it in the fine print, minimized it in our marketing. We chose profits over transparency. Mrs. Park died because of that choice. So yes, I understand Mr. Park's rage. I don't condone it, but I understand it. Are you saying you bear responsibility for Mrs. Park's death? Hayes looked directly at Andrew Park. Yes, legal responsibility. That's for other courts to decide, but moral responsibility, absolutely. The prosecutor looked defeated. This was not going according to plan. Thompson stood for cross-examination, but Hayes cut him off. "I have something to say if the court permits." Judge Sloan nodded. "Proceed." Hayes turned to address Andrew Park directly. "Mr. Park, I'm sorry. Not the corporate sorry that means nothing but truly, deeply sorry. Your wife died because I prioritized profits over people. I can't bring her back. I can't undo that choice. But I can promise you that her death will not be meaningless. Every reform I'm implementing, every family that will receive affordable medication, every life saved because we're now transparent about side effects, that's Sarah's legacy. She's saving lives even now. I hope someday you can find some comfort in that." Park was crying again, but silently this time. He nodded once, barely perceptible, but Daniel saw it. A tiny crack in the wall of rage and grief. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Daniel waited in the hallway with Helen David Hayes and a growing crowd of others. When they returned, the foreman stood nervously. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant not guilty by reason of temporary emotional distress. On the lesser charge of assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant guilty." Judge Sloan nodded. "Mr. Park, you've been found guilty of assault. However, given the extraordinary circumstances, the genuine remorse you've shown, and the forgiveness expressed by your victim, I'm inclined toward leniency. I sentence you to 5 years with the possibility of parole and 2 contingent upon completion of mental health treatment and anger management programs. Additionally, you'll serve 200 hours of community service with a grief counseling organization." It was far less than the prosecutor had wanted, but Daniel saw the wisdom in it. Prison wouldn't heal Andrew Park. Time and therapy might. As the courtroom cleared, Daniel found himself walking out beside David Hayes. "Your father did well up there," Daniel said. "He meant every word. He's a changed man. The board is forcing him out next week, you know, golden parachute and all that, but still. 40 years building that company, and they're kicking him to the curb for developing a conscience. What will he do?" David smiled. "He's starting a nonprofit, medical access advocacy. He wants to hire you, actually. Says you understand the real cost of medical inequality better than any policy expert." Daniel stopped walking. "He wants to hire me, but I already accepted Judge Sloan's offer." "He knows, but the offer stands whenever you're ready. He says you saved his life. The least he can do is offer you options." That evening, Daniel picked up Lily from Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. She was flour-dusted and grinning, carrying a container of slightly lopsided empanadas. "I made these. They're probably terrible, but they're perfect," Daniel said, meaning it. They walked home slowly, Daniel's shoulder aching but his heart light. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean and gleaming in the streetlight. "Daddy, are you sad about the man who shot you?" "Sad for him, not about him. He lost someone he loved very much. That kind of pain can make people do things they never imagined." "But you stopped him from doing something worse." "I helped him stop himself. There's a difference." Lily considered this as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. "I think you're wrong about not being a hero. Heroes help people stop themselves from becoming villains." Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. Their apartment felt different now. Same furniture, same water stain on the ceiling, same creaky floorboard by the kitchen. But the weight that had pressed down on these rooms for years, the weight of poverty, of desperation, of impossible choices, had lifted. The refrigerator was full. The medicine cabinet had Lily's full prescription. The pile of bills on the kitchen table was manageable. Daniel had money now, could move to a better neighborhood, but something kept him here. These walls had witnessed their struggle. Leaving felt like abandoning part of their story. "Can we visit Mr. Park?" Lily asked suddenly over dinner. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because he's sad and alone. And you taught me that when people are sad and alone, we should try to help them." Daniel looked at his 8-year-old daughter, wondering when she'd become so wise. "Maybe. When he's ready. It might be a while." "That's okay. Sad takes time to get better." 2 weeks later, Daniel reported for his first day as a court officer. The uniform felt strange official in a way his janitor's outfit had never been. Badge radio, the weight of responsibility. Judge Sloan had pulled strings to get him through an accelerated training program, and while his shoulder limited some physical activities, he'd passed all the required tests. "Officer Carter," Judge Sloan said as he entered her chambers that first morning, "how does it feel?" "Like I'm playing dress-up," he admitted. "You'll grow into it. I have a favor to ask. We're implementing a new program, victim offender mediation. Voluntary, of course, but I think you'd be perfect to oversee it." "I don't have any training in mediation." "You mediated between Andrew Park and Victor Hayes without any training. You understood both sides, showed compassion to both. That's not something you can teach." Daniel thought about it. Would Park and Hayes be willing to meet? "Hayes has already agreed. Park, we're working on it. His therapist thinks it might help, but he needs more time." "Time helps," Daniel agreed, rubbing his shoulder. The days settled into a new rhythm. Court officer by day, father by evening, student at night. Judge Sloan had enrolled him in online criminal justice courses. Lily thrived, her health stabilizing with proper medication. She joined the school soccer team, something that would have been impossible before. One evening, a month after starting his new job, Daniel received an unexpected call. "Mr. Carter, this is Monica Hayes Victor's daughter. I wanted to thank you and to ask a favor." "Of course." "My father is struggling. The board forced him out, as you probably heard. He's throwing himself into this nonprofit work, but he's isolated. David and I are trying to reconnect with him, but there's so much history, so much hurt. We were wondering, would you have dinner with us, all of us? You and your daughter, too. He listens to you, respects you in a way he doesn't respect many people." Daniel considered it. "When?" "Saturday. Nothing fancy, just dinner at David's apartment. We're trying to learn how to be a family again, and we thought maybe having someone there who understands second chances might help." "We'll be there." Saturday arrived crisp and clear. Lily wore her best dress, the one they'd bought for school pictures with some of Hayes' money. She was nervous, fidgeting with the hem. "What if they don't like me?" "Impossible," Daniel said. "Nobody could not like you. You have to say that. You're my dad. I have to say it, and it happens to be true." David's apartment was in a nice building, downtown doorman and everything. The elevator made Lily's eyes wide. Their building didn't have one. David answered the door looking casual in jeans and a sweater, immediately crouching to Lily's level. "You must be Lily. I heard you're learning to make empanadas." "They're getting better," Lily said seriously. "The first batch looked like sick fish." David laughed and the ice broke. Monica appeared warm and welcoming, leading them into a living room where Victor Hayes sat looking deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Carter," he said, standing, "and you must be Lily." Lily studied him with those two wise eyes. "You're the medicine man." "I suppose I am." "My daddy says you're trying to be better." "That's good. Everyone should try to be better." Hayes actually smiled. "Your father is a wise man." "He's okay," Lily said, making everyone laugh. Dinner was awkward at first. 20 years of family dysfunction doesn't disappear over pasta. But gradually, with Lily asking innocent questions and Daniel providing gentle redirection when things got tense, walls began to crumble. "I remember when you were Lily's age," Victor told Monica. "You wanted to be a doctor. Specifically, you wanted to cure what you called sad sickness." "Depression," Monica said softly. "I saw how Mom struggled with it." "I was too busy to notice," Victor admitted. "Too focused on building the company to see your mother was drowning." "She tried to tell you," David said, old anger surfacing. I know now. Too late, but I know." Lily, who'd been quietly eating her spaghetti, piped up. "It's never too late. That's what Daddy says. As long as you're breathing, you can choose to be better." The adults sat in stunned silence. Then Victor Hayes did something none of his children had ever seen. He cried. Not the desperate tears he'd shed after the shooting, but quiet, cleansing tears. Monica moved first, taking his hand, then David awkwardly patting his shoulder, and Lily, never one to let someone cry alone, climbed into his lap and hugged him. "It's okay, Mr. Medicine Man. Sad takes time to get better." Daniel watched this scene unfold, thinking about cycles, how violence breeds violence, but also how kindness breeds kindness. One act of intervention had rippled outward, touching lives he'd never imagined. After dinner, while the kids, because David and Monica became kids again around their father, Years of hurt temporarily set aside, looked through old photo albums, Victor pulled Daniel aside. The nonprofit is ready to launch. We're calling it Second Chances Medical Foundation. I want you on the board. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You understand what families go through. You know the real cost of medical inequality, and you believe in redemption, which is what this is really about. Giving people second chances at health, at life. I'll think about it. Also, Victor continued, I've been in contact with Andrew Park's therapist. With his permission, of course. Andrew wants to meet with me. To talk. The therapist thinks it would be helpful, but only if you're there. As a mediator. Daniel felt the weight of this request. That's a lot to ask of both of you. It's necessary. I need to face what I've done. And he needs to see me as human, not as a monster. You've already proven you can bridge that gap. 2 weeks later, Daniel found himself in a small room at the minimum security facility where Andrew Park was serving his sentence. Park looked better, still thin, but cleaner, more present. Victor Hayes sat across from him, nervous, as Daniel had ever seen him. Thank you for agreeing to this, Victor began. Park's laugh was bitter. I didn't do it for you. I know. You did it for Sarah. At her name, Park flinched. Don't. You don't get to say her name. You're right. I'm sorry. They sat in tense silence. Daniel let it stretch, knowing sometimes silence was necessary. Finally, Park spoke. She suffered. The last months. Constant pain, confusion, fear. The doctors didn't know what was wrong until it was too late. Liver failure, they said, from the medication. The medication that was supposed to save her life. I know, Victor said quietly. I've read her file. All the files. 63 people dead from undisclosed side effects. 200 more with permanent damage. Numbers, Park spat. They're not numbers, they were people. Sarah was a person. Tell me about her, Victor said, surprising both men. Not the victim, the person. Who was she? Park's anger flickered, replaced by something softer. She was light, pure light, taught kindergarten. Came home every day with stories about her kids. Little Marcus, who couldn't pronounce R's. Stephanie, who insisted on wearing her tutu every day. She loved them all. He continued talking, words pouring out like water from a broken dam. About their first date, their wedding, their plans for children. About her illness. The hope when they found cardizine, the slow, horrible realization that the cure was killing her. Victor listened without interrupting, without defending. When Park finally ran out of words, exhausted, Victor spoke. She sounds extraordinary. The world is dimmer without her. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I'm acknowledging a loss I caused. I can't bring her back. I can't undo the damage. But I can make sure her death means something. Every reform, every family helped, every life saved, that's her legacy. It doesn't bring her back. No, nothing will. But maybe it prevents other Andrews from sitting where you are, other Sarahs from dying needlessly. Park looked at Daniel. How do you do it? How do you forgive? I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, Daniel said carefully. Acceptance, maybe. Understanding. Recognizing that holding on to anger only hurts me and teaches my daughter that revenge matters more than redemption. Your daughter, she's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the reason I stepped in front of that gun. Not to be a hero, but to be someone she could be proud of. Park turned back to Victor. I'll never forgive you, not fully. But maybe I can stop hating you. That's all I can offer. That's more than I deserve, Victor said. As they left the facility, Victor looked drained but somehow lighter. Thank you for facilitating that. You both needed it. I've done the math, Victor said suddenly. 63 people dead because of my decisions. 200 injured. Thousands who suffered financially. The weight of that. How do you live with it? Daniel thought about his answer. By doing better. Every day choosing to do better. It doesn't erase the past, but it shapes the future. Your daughter said that, 8 years old and wiser than most adults. She's had to grow up fast, but she's maintained her kindness. That's what matters. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the city in white, just as Daniel was finding his rhythm in his new life. 6 months had passed since the shooting, and the scar on his shoulder had faded to pink, though it still ached when the barometer dropped. He stood in Judge Sloan's courtroom maintaining order during a particularly contentious custody hearing when his radio crackled with an urgent message. "Officer Carter, please report to Chamber B. We have a situation." Daniel excused himself quietly, making his way down the marble corridor he'd once mopped. Chamber B was one of the smaller hearing rooms usually used for family court matters. He could hear raised voices before he even reached the door. Inside, a young woman stood trembling before the bench, clutching a baby to her chest. Her ex-husband, a man built like a linebacker with fists clenched at his sides, was shouting at the judge while his lawyer tried desperately to calm him. "She can't take my son away. I have rights." The judge, an elderly man named Harrison, who was known for his patience, looked ready to call security. That's when he spotted Daniel. "Officer Carter, please escort Mr. Brennan out until he can compose himself." Daniel approached carefully, recognizing the dangerous combination of rage and desperation in the man's eyes. He'd seen that look before in Andrew Park's face in his own mirror during the darkest nights. "Mr. Brennan," Daniel said calmly, "let's step outside, get some air, talk this through." "I'm not going anywhere. That's my son. She's trying to steal." The baby started crying, picking up on the tension. The young woman, barely 22 by Daniel's estimation, held him tighter. Fear etched across her face. "Your son needs this to end peacefully," Daniel said, keeping his voice low and steady. "Whatever the judge decides you want your boy to know, his father is someone who can control himself, who handles problems with words, not violence. Trust me, I know what it's like to fight for your child. But this isn't the way." Something in Daniel's tone must have reached him. Brennan's shoulders sagged slightly. 5 minutes outside," Daniel offered. "Just to cool down. Then we come back and handle this properly." Brennan allowed himself to be let out, and Daniel spent the next 20 minutes listening to him pour out his story. Lost his job drinking problem ex-wife, afraid for the baby's safety. Classic cycle of destruction. "I'm getting help," Brennan insisted. "AA meetings, anger management, but she won't give me a chance." "Chances are earned, not given," Daniel said gently. "Show the court you're committed to change. Document everything, every meeting, every therapy session. Prove you can be the father your son deserves." When they returned to the courtroom, Brennan was calmer. He apologized to the judge, spoke respectfully about his commitment to rehabilitation, and accepted supervised visitation without protest. It wasn't what he wanted, but it was a start. After the hearing, the young woman approached Daniel. "Thank you. I thought he was going to hurt someone." "He's hurting enough already," Daniel said. "Sometimes people just need someone to see that." Judge Harrison caught Daniel on his way out. "That was well handled, Officer Carter. You've got a gift for de-escalation." "I just treat people like people, Your Honor. If only more of us remembered to do that." That evening, Daniel was helping Lily with her homework when his phone rang. Victor Hayes' name appeared on the screen. "Daniel, I need your help. It's Andrew Park." Daniel's stomach clenched. "What happened?" "He attempted suicide in his cell. He's alive in the medical ward, but can you come? He's asking for you." Daniel looked at Lily, absorbed in her math problems. Mrs. Rodriguez could watch her for a few hours. "I'll be there in 30 minutes." The prison medical ward smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. Andrew Park lay on a narrow bed, wrists bandaged, eyes staring at nothing. A guard stood by the door, looking uncomfortable. "Andrew," Daniel said softly, pulling up a chair. "I'm here." Park's eyes slowly focused on him. "I couldn't do it anymore. The dreams. I see her every night, and she asks why I became a monster, why I tried to kill someone." "You're not a monster. You're a man who lost everything and didn't know how to handle the pain. I shot you, an innocent man with a daughter to raise. And I forgave you. Remember." Park turned away. "I can't forgive myself." Daniel was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "When my wife died giving birth to Lily, I blamed myself for years. If I'd noticed the symptoms earlier, if I'd insisted on a different hospital, if I'd done 1,000 things differently. The guilt ate at me until I realized something. Maria wouldn't want me drowning in guilt. She'd want me living, being the best father I could be. Sarah wouldn't want this for you. How do you know what she'd want? Because Helen told me about her. Because everyone who speaks about Sarah describes someone full of love and compassion. That kind of person doesn't want their loved ones suffering forever. Park started crying, silent tears rolling down his cheeks. I miss her so much. That won't go away, but it changes, becomes bearable. And one day you'll realize you can honor her memory by living the kind of life she'd be proud of. They sat in silence until Park dozed off, exhausted by emotion. Daniel found Victor in the waiting room looking haggard. Thank you for coming, Victor said. The prison therapist said he's been declining for weeks. Stopped eating, stopped participating in sessions. He needs more than therapy. He needs purpose. What kind of purpose can you find in prison? Daniel thought about it. What if he could help other grieving spouses? People who've lost loved ones to medical negligence or malpractice. Not as a lawyer or advocate, but as someone who understands their pain. Victor's eyes lit up. The foundation. We could create a program, grief counseling support groups. He could coordinate from inside, help develop the curriculum. You'd trust him with that. He shot you and you forgave him. He tried to kill me and I understand why. Maybe trust is what he needs to start healing. The program took 2 months to establish. Red tape, prison regulations, liability concerns, all the bureaucratic nightmares Daniel was learning to navigate in his new role. But finally, the Sarah Park Memorial Grief Support Initiative was approved. Andrew would help design the program from his cell, corresponding with counselors, and eventually, when ready, speaking to groups via video link. The first session was rough. Andrew could barely get through introducing himself without breaking down. But a widower in the group who'd lost his wife to a botched surgery said something that changed everything. I wanted to burn down the hospital. I had plans, detailed plans. But hearing your story, seeing where that path leads, you saved me from becoming you. That's not an insult, it's gratitude. Andrew began to understand that his lowest moment could become someone else's lifeline. Meanwhile, Daniel's life had settled into a new rhythm. Court officer by day, studying at night, and somehow becoming the unofficial mediator for cases that didn't quite fit the traditional system. Judge Sloan had started specifically requesting him for difficult situations, domestic disputes, juvenile cases, anything where compassion might succeed where authority failed. One morning she called him into her chambers with an unusual request. We're implementing a new pilot program, restorative justice, bringing together victims and offenders in controlled settings to facilitate healing. I want you to head it. Your Honor, I'm just a court officer with a GED and half a semester of community college. You're a man who looked at his shooter and saw a human being in pain, who brought together Victor Hayes and his children after decades of estrangement, who gets through to people everyone else has written off. I don't care about your credentials. I care about your character. What would this involve? Training, certainly, a significant pay increase, and the chance to change how we think about justice. Instead of just punishment, we focus on healing for everyone involved. Daniel thought about Lily, about the example he wanted to set for her. Can I think about it? Of course, but Daniel, this is what you're already doing. We'd just be making it official. That night he discussed it with Lily over Chinese takeout, their Friday tradition. So you'd help bad people and sad people talk to each other, she summarized with 8-year-old clarity. Something like that. Like you did with Mr. Medicine Man and Mr. Sad Husband. Daniel smiled at her nicknames for Victor and Andrew. Exactly like that. I think you should do it. You're good at making people feel better. Remember when Tommy Brennan's dad was so angry you made him calm? That's like a superpower. It's not a superpower, sweetheart. It's just listening. Anyone can do it. But most people don't, Lily pointed out, wise beyond her years. The training program was intensive, 3 months of psychology, conflict resolution, legal frameworks, and practical exercises. Daniel attended classes after his court shifts, coming home exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time in his life, he was using his mind in ways that challenged and excited him. His first official case as a restorative justice facilitator involved a teenager who'd stolen a car and crashed it, paralyzing the owner's daughter. The family was destroyed medical bills retrofitting their home for a wheelchair emotional trauma. The teenager Marcus was looking at serious jail time. The victim's father, Robert Chen, initially refused to participate. I don't want to hear his excuses. My daughter will never walk again because he wanted a joyride. But his daughter Amy insisted. At 17, she had the same determined spirit that reminded Daniel of Lily. I need to understand why, Amy said from her wheelchair. I need to look him in the eye and understand. The first meeting was in a conference room at the courthouse. Marcus could barely lift his head, shame radiating from every pore. Amy sat straight-backed in her wheelchair, her parents flanking her like guards. Daniel opened with simple ground rules: respect honesty, no interruptions. Then he let silence do its work. Marcus spoke first, haltingly. I'm sorry, I know that means nothing, but I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking about consequences. My mom had just died, and I wanted to feel something other than pain. Speed felt like flying, like escaping. I never thought. You never thought about who you might hurt, Robert said bitterly. No, Marcus admitted. I was selfish, stupid, criminal. Tell me about your mother, Amy said suddenly, surprising everyone. Marcus looked confused. Why? Because I want to understand who you were before you became the person who changed my life. So Marcus talked about his mother's 2-year battle with cancer, about being her caregiver at 15, about watching her fade away, holding her hand when she died, feeling utterly alone in the world. The night I stole the car was the 6-month anniversary of her death. I couldn't stand being in my own skin. Amy was crying, but her voice stayed steady. I'm angry at you, furious. I had a swimming scholarship to Stanford. I was going to the Olympics trials. That's all gone because of 20 minutes of your pain. I know, I'd give anything to undo it. But you can't. So what can you give? Marcus looked at Daniel, lost. Daniel remained neutral, letting them find their own way. I don't know. Tell me what you need. Amy thought for a long moment. I need you to make this mean something. Not just jail time that doesn't help me. I need you to stop other kids from making your mistake. How? Speak at schools, tell your story, show them the consequences. Visit me once a month and see my reality. Help other kids dealing with grief before they explode like you did. Marcus nodded eagerly. Yes. All of that. Yes. Robert wasn't satisfied. That's not enough. The medical bills. I'll work, Marcus interrupted. Whatever job I can get, every penny beyond basic survival goes to you, for as long as it takes. That could be decades. Then decades. The negotiation continued for hours. By the end, they had an agreement. Marcus would serve 2 years in juvenile detention, then 5 years of probation, with strict conditions, monthly visits with Amy, weekly speaking engagements at schools, every paycheck garnished for medical expenses. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As they prepared to leave, Amy wheeled herself over to Marcus. I may never forgive you completely, but I want to try, because hating you is exhausting and I need my energy for healing. Marcus broke down completely then, and surprisingly, Robert Chen put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Not in comfort exactly, but in acknowledgement of shared humanity. After they left, Daniel sat alone in the conference room, emotionally drained but satisfied. This was what justice could look like, not just punishment, but transformation. His phone buzzed. A text from Victor Hayes. Emergency board meeting for the foundation. Need you here. Daniel arrived at the foundation offices, a modest suite downtown. Nothing like Hayes Pharmaceuticals' former glass tower to find chaos. Board members argued loudly while Victor sat at the head of the table looking defeated. What's happening? Daniel asked. The pharmaceutical lobby is suing us, saw board member Janet Morrison explained. They claim our free medication program constitutes unfair competition. They're seeking an injunction. That's insane, Daniel said. We're a nonprofit providing medicine to people who can't afford it. Welcome to the American healthcare system, another board member said bitterly. Victor stood slowly. They're not really after us. They're after me, warning other executives not to grow a conscience. If we fold now, everything we've built disappears. So we fight, Daniel said simply. With what money, legal fees could bankrupt us in months. Daniel thought about all the families depending on the foundation, kids like Lily, who needed medication to survive. What if we made it public? Really public. Show people what's at stake. A PR campaign. More than that, real faces, real stories. Every family we've helped, every life saved, make it impossible for them to shut us down without looking like monsters. Janet shook her head. That's naive. They don't care about looking like monsters. But politicians care about votes. Judges care about public opinion, even if they pretend not to. And juries are just people who understand what it's like to struggle with medical bills. Victor studied Daniel with something like pride. You're proposing we turn this into a movement. I'm proposing we tell the truth, loudly. The campaign started small. Families recording testimonials on their phones, sharing them on social media. Amy Chen from her wheelchair talking about second chances and the power of redemption. Andrew Park via video link from prison explaining how helping others had saved him from drowning in grief. Even little Lily, with Daniel's permission, sharing what it meant to take her medicine without fear. The video that went viral, though, was unexpected. Someone had recorded Daniel's testimony at Andrew's trial on their phone. His words about choosing kindness in the darkest moments about seeing humanity in everyone resonated across divides. Choose. Differently became a trending hashtag. The pharmaceutical companies tried to withdraw the lawsuit quietly, but it was too late. Congressional hearings were called, media attention intensified, and at the center of it all, Victor Hayes sat in the witness chair calmly detailing decades of industry practices designed to maximize profits at the expense of lives. I was part of the problem, he said to the congressional committee. For 40 years, I chose money over morality. It took a janitor with nothing stepping in front of a bullet to show me what real value looks like. His daughter needed our medicine to live, and he still saved my life. That kind of grace demands change. The hearing room was silent. Then a senator asked, "What do you propose, Mr. Hayes?" Price caps tied to median income, transparent reporting of all side effects, mandatory charity programs, and a fundamental shift in how we measure success, not by profit margins, but by lives saved and improved. That would revolutionize the industry. Or return it to its original purpose, healing people. The lawsuit was dropped. The foundation continued its work, expanding rapidly. Other pharmaceutical executives, shamed or inspired, began their own programs. It wasn't enough, not nearly, but it was a beginning. Daniel watched these changes from his unique position, part court officer, part mediator, part board member, but always primarily Lily's father. She was thriving now, her heart condition stable, her spirit undaunted. She'd started a kindness club at school, teaching other kids about choosing compassion over conflict. One evening, as spring returned to the city, Daniel stood in the courthouse where everything had changed. The marble floor gleamed someone else's responsibility now. He thought about the journey from that desperate morning calculating impossible bills to now. Officer Carter. A voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find a young man, maybe 20, in a janitor's uniform. Yes, I'm Tom Washington. I just started here cleaning nights. I heard about you, what you did, how you went from janitor to all this. He gestured vaguely at Daniel's uniform. I wanted to ask, how did you change everything? Daniel thought about the question seriously. I didn't change everything. I just made one choice in one moment to see someone else's humanity, even when they couldn't see mine. The rest followed from that. But you could have been killed. Yes. But living in fear and anger was killing me slowly anyway. At least this way my daughter got to see her father choose love over hate. Tom nodded slowly, processing this. My son has autism. The therapy costs are crushing us. Some days I want to burn the whole system down. I know that feeling, but the system is made of people. Some are lost like Victor Hayes was. Some are broken like Andrew Park. And some are just trying to survive like we are. Change comes from seeing each other clearly, not from fire. You really believe that? Daniel thought of Amy Chen learning to navigate life in a wheelchair while pushing for Marcus's redemption. Of Andrew Park finding purpose in his pain. Of Victor Hayes losing an empire but finding his soul. of Judge Sloan after 20 years on the bench, rediscovering why justice mattered. "I've seen it," Daniel said simply. "Over and over I've seen people choose to be better when given the chance." Tom left with a little more hope in his eyes. Daniel continued his rounds, checking courtrooms, maintaining order in the halls of justice. His shoulder ached, it always would, but the pain reminded him that some things were worth bleeding for. His phone buzzed, a text from Lily. "Daddy, Mrs. Rodriguez is teaching me to make soup. Can Mr. Medicine Man come to dinner? He seems lonely." Daniel smiled. Victor Hayes, former billionaire, was indeed lonely. His children were trying, but decades of damage took time to heal. Maybe soup and an 8-year-old's chatter would help. "Sure, sweetheart. Tell him 6:30. As he was leaving for the day, Judge Sloan stopped him. "Daniel, I've been asked to testify before the Senate about judicial reform. I want you to come with me." "Your Honor, If you say just a court officer or just a janitor, I will hold you in contempt," she said with a slight smile. "You're a man who understands justice better than most lawyers I know. Your perspective matters." What would I even say? The truth. That justice isn't about punishment or even laws. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and acting accordingly. That's what you've taught all of us. Daniel thought about Maria, who would have been proud but not surprised. She'd always seen more in him than he saw in himself. He thought about his father, who'd taught him that the measure of a man was how he treated his enemies. He thought about Lily, who believed her daddy could do anything. "All right," he said. "I'll testify." Judge Sloan nodded, satisfied. "Good, because the system needs voices like yours, people who've been on both sides, the powerless, and now increasingly the powerful, who understand that the distance between them is smaller than most believe." That evening dinner was a strange but warming affair. Victor Hayes, once one of the richest men in the state, sat at Daniel's small kitchen table eating Mrs. Rodriguez's soup and listening to Lily explain her school project about butterflies. "They completely dissolve in the cocoon," Lily said earnestly. "Turn into soup, basically, then somehow become something totally different and beautiful." "Metamorphosis," Victor said softly, catching Daniel's eye. "Complete transformation." "Exactly. My teacher says it's like magic, but it's really just nature." "Or maybe," Mrs. Rodriguez said, bringing more bread to the table, "nature is magic, the everyday kind we forget to notice." Andrew Park called during dessert. He was allowed one call a week, and he'd taken to using it to check in with Daniel. They put him on speaker so everyone could hear. "The grief group had a breakthrough today," Andrew reported. "A woman who'd been silent for 6 weeks finally spoke. Said hearing my story made her realize she wasn't alone in her anger. That feeling heard or seen was the first step toward healing." "That's wonderful," Daniel said, meaning it. "I still have bad days. Days where the guilt feels like drowning, but then I remember what you said about honoring Sarah by living a life she'd be proud of. So I keep going." After the call, Victor was quiet for a long moment. "I've destroyed so many lives," he said finally. "Even with all the changes, the foundation, it feels like trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon." "But you're trying," Lily said firmly. "That matters. Daddy says trying is the most important part. Your daddy is a wise man." "He's learning," Daniel corrected. "We're all learning." Later, after everyone had gone and Lily was asleep, Daniel stood on his fire escape, looking out at the city lights. Each light represented a life, a story, struggles and triumphs invisible from this distance, but no less real. Somewhere out there, Tom Washington was mopping floors and dreaming of better days. Somewhere, Amy Chen was adapting to her new reality with remarkable grace. Somewhere, Marcus was writing another speech about consequences and redemption. The city that had once felt like a prison now felt like possibility. Not because it had changed poverty, still ground people down, and justice still flourished. The powerful still exploited the powerless. But because Daniel now understood that change happened one choice at a time, one person at a time, one moment of unexpected grace at a time. His phone rang. An unknown number, but he answered anyway. "Mr. Carter, this is Dr. Patricia Hernandez from Columbia Medical School. We received your application for our Community Health Advocate program. While your academic credentials are unconventional, Your practical experience and recommendations are extraordinary. We'd like to offer you a full scholarship." Daniel nearly dropped the phone. He'd applied on a whim, encouraged by Judge Sloan, and Victor never expecting anything to come of it. "Mr. Carter, are you there?" "Yes, sorry, I'm just surprised." "Don't be. Your essay about the intersection of justice and healthcare was one of the most insightful we've received. Your perspective, someone who's lived the reality of medical inequality, is exactly what our program needs." After hanging up, Daniel sat on the fire escape in stunned silence. From janitor to court officer to mediator to possibly, Dr. Healthcare Advocate. He thought of Lily's butterflies dissolving completely, only to emerge transformed. The scholarship would change everything, but Daniel couldn't bring himself to accept it immediately. He sat at his kitchen table that night staring at the acceptance letter while Lily slept peacefully in the next room. The opportunity felt too big, too impossible for someone who'd spent years invisible, cleaning up after others' lives rather than building his own. The next morning, he found Judge Sloan in her chambers earlier than usual, reviewing case files with her characteristic intensity. "Your Honor, I need advice." She looked up, noting his troubled expression. "The scholarship, you're having doubts. How did you—" "Dr. Hernandez called me for a reference. I told her she'd be foolish not to accept you." She set down her pen. "So what's the problem?" "I have a good job here, stability, benefits. Lily needs that. Lily needs a father who reaches for his dreams, not one who settles for safety." Judge Sloan's voice softened. "Daniel, I've watched you transform this courthouse. You've turned our restorative justice program into a model other districts are copying, but your impact could be so much larger. What about the program? I can't just abandon it." "You're not abandoning anything. You're evolving. Besides, the program needs to grow beyond one person, however gifted." She smiled. "I have someone in mind to train as your successor, Tom Washington." Daniel blinked in surprise. "The janitor? Former janitor. I offered him your old position yesterday. He starts training next week. You've inspired more people than you know, Daniel." That afternoon, Daniel's mediation session was interrupted by urgent news. Marcus, the teenager who'd paralyzed Amy Chen, had been attacked in juvenile detention. He was in critical condition. Daniel rushed to the hospital, finding Amy already there in her wheelchair, her parents beside her. Robert Chen's face was a mask of conflicting emotions. "We don't know why we came," Robert admitted, "after everything he did to us." "You came because you're human," Daniel said simply. "Because you've chosen to see him as human, too." Amy was staring at the ICU doors. "If he dies, does that make us even— is that justice?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "That's just more tragedy." A woman emerged from the ICU, Marcus's aunt, his only remaining family. She looked exhausted, broken. When she saw Amy, she stopped uncertain. "I'm sorry," she said, though it wasn't clear what she was apologizing for. "He's been trying so hard to change. The other kids found out he was speaking at schools about drunk driving, called him a snitch." Amy wheeled herself forward. "Can I see him?" Her parents protested, but Amy was insistent. "I need to, please." The doctors allowed it somehow, recognizing this was about more than medical protocol. Daniel accompanied them into the ICU, where Marcus lay unconscious, machines breathing for him. Amy reached out and took his hand. "You don't get to die," she said firmly. "You owe me decades of payments, remember? You owe me monthly visits. You owe those kids at schools your story. You don't get to take the easy way out." Perhaps it was coincidence, but Marcus's fingers twitched in hers. "I'm going to testify," Amy announced. "At the hearing about the attack, I'm going to tell them he's in my program, that I need him to complete it, that his rehabilitation matters to my recovery." Robert Chen stared at his daughter. "Amy, you don't owe him anything." "I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me, because holding on to hate is exhausting, and I need my energy for healing. Daniel taught me that." Daniel felt the weight of unexpected influence. He'd never told Amy those words directly. She'd learned them from watching, from absorbing the philosophy of restorative justice he'd been building. Outside the ICU, Daniel found Victor Hayes in the waiting room. He'd come as soon as he heard understanding the delicate ecosystem of redemption they'd all become part of. The boys who attacked Marcus, Victor said, their families can't afford lawyers. They'll get public defenders who won't care. You want to pay for their defense? I want to pay for their rehabilitation. Prison won't fix what's broken in them. It didn't fix what was broken in me. You did that. A moment of grace did that. They were interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor, Andrew Park's sister-in-law, Helen. She'd been following Marcus's story, another strange connection in their web of interlinked lives. Sarah would have been here, she said simply. She would have sat by that boy's bedside and held his hand. So I'm here in her place. The waiting room gradually filled with others. Tom Washington came after his shift still in his new court officer uniform. Mrs. Rodriguez brought sandwiches for everyone. Even Judge Sloan stopped by after court, her robes replaced with civilian clothes that made her look surprisingly vulnerable. This is what you've built, she told Daniel quietly. A community of people who've learned to see past their own pain. Marcus survived. The attack had been brutal, but he was young and strong and perhaps motivated by Amy's fierce insistence that he had work to finish. The boys who attacked him were arrested, and true to his word, Victor paid for their counseling and legal support aimed at rehabilitation rather than just punishment. During Marcus's recovery, Amy visited daily. She taught him to navigate in a wheelchair, temporary for him, permanent for her. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The view's different from down here, Marcus said one afternoon, struggling with the chair's controls. Everything's different from down here, Amy agreed. But not necessarily worse, just different. Her parents watched these interactions with amazement. Their daughter, who had every right to hatred, was choosing something else entirely. How, Robert asked Daniel one day, how is she doing this? She's stronger than her circumstances, Daniel replied, just like you raised her to be. The Senate hearings on judicial reform came faster than expected. Daniel found himself on a train to Washington. Judge Sloan beside him, both preparing testimony that might reshape how America thought about justice. Nervous, Judge Sloan asked. Terrified, Daniel admitted. I'm about to tell senators that our entire system is broken. Good. It needs to be said. And it needs to be said by someone who's lived it, not just observed it. The hearing room was imposing all dark wood and formal protocols. Daniel was scheduled to speak after several legal experts and before Judge Sloan. As he listened to the experts discuss recidivism rates and cost-benefit analyses, he thought about the human faces behind those statistics. When his turn came, his voice was steady, despite his racing heart. Senators, my name is Daniel Carter. 2 years ago, I was a janitor mopping the floors of a courthouse, invisible to everyone who passed. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my daughter's heart medication and still came up short. I existed in an America that most of you have never seen, the one where a medical emergency means bankruptcy, where justice is a luxury we can't afford. The room was silent. He continued, Then I stepped in front of a gun meant for a pharmaceutical CEO who'd priced families like mine out of survival. Not because I'm a hero, but because I was tired of a world where desperation drives good people to terrible actions. That moment changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone it touched. He told them about Andrew Park finding purpose in prison, about Marcus and Amy redefining justice through personal connection, about Victor Hayes losing an empire but finding his soul. We've created a restorative justice program that's reduced repeat offenses by 60%, not through harsher punishments, but through human connection. Through seeing offenders as people capable of change and victims as people who need more than just vengeance. A senator interrupted. Mr. Carter, this sounds admirable but unrealistic for scale. How could this work nationally? By recognizing that justice isn't about winning or losing. It's about healing. Every crime creates a wound in the victim, in the offender, in the community. Traditional justice often deepens those wounds. Restorative justice tries to heal them. But some crimes are too severe for forgiveness. I'm not talking about forgiveness. I'm talking about transformation. The man who shot me is now counseling grieving families, preventing future violence. The CEO he tried to kill is using his wealth to provide free medication to thousands. The teenager who paralyzed a girl is becoming a voice against reckless driving. These aren't feel-good stories, they're proof that people can change when given the framework to do so. The questions came fast and hard, but Daniel answered from experience rather than theory. He spoke about Tom Washington, the janitor who'd become a court officer, about the foundation fighting pharmaceutical companies and winning, about children like Lily, who could now afford their medications because one moment of intervention had rippled outward. When Judge Sloan spoke after him, she built on his foundation with legal precedents and constitutional arguments, but she ended with something personal. I've been a judge for 22 years. I'd become cynical seeing the same cycles of poverty and crime, the same systemic failures. Then Daniel Carter showed me that justice isn't found in law books or precedents. It's found in the choice to see humanity in everyone, victim and offender alike. If we can build a system that reflects that truth, we might actually achieve justice rather than just punishment. The hearings made national news. Daniel's testimony, paired with Judge Sloan's legal expertise, sparked discussions in law schools and courthouses across the country. But for Daniel, the immediate concern was Lily. She'd watched his testimony on C-SPAN from their apartment, Mrs. Rodriguez beside her. "You were amazing, Daddy," she said when he called that night. "You told them the truth." Was it enough? It's a start. You always say change happens one person at a time. Back home, Daniel threw himself into transitioning his responsibilities before starting medical school. He trained Tom Washington in mediation techniques, watching the younger man grasp concepts that had taken Daniel months to understand. "You have an advantage I didn't," Daniel told him. "You already know what it's like to be invisible. Use that. See the people others overlook." The farewell party at the courthouse was emotional. Judge Sloan presented him with a plaque, "Daniel Carter, court officer, mediator, teacher, friend." But it was the individual testimonials that broke him. Tom Washington spoke about finding hope in Daniel's story. Amy Chen, standing with technological assistants she'd been developing, talked about learning that justice and revenge weren't synonymous. Marcus, via video from his rehabilitation facility, credited Daniel with showing him that redemption was possible. But it was Andrew Park's message that hit deepest. He'd been granted special permission to attend via secured video link. "Daniel Carter saved my life twice. Once, when he stopped me from becoming a murderer, and again, when he showed me that my pain could have purpose. I'll never fully recover from losing Sarah, but I've learned that grieving doesn't mean giving up. It means carrying love forward in new ways. Daniel taught me that." Victor Hayes was last to speak, and his words were simple. "Most people get one life. Daniel gave me a second one. I'm trying to be worthy of it." Lily had prepared a speech but abandoned it instead, just hugging her father. "You're going to be a great doctor," she whispered, "because you already know how to heal people." Medical school was a different kind of challenge. At 41, Daniel was older than most professors, let alone students. His study group consisted of 20-somethings who called him Dad affectionately and came to him with life problems as often as academic ones. "You've actually lived," one young woman said during a late-night study session. "The rest of us are just theorizing about life and death. You've been there." The coursework was brutal. Anatomy, biochemistry, pathology, subjects that seemed impossibly complex. But Daniel approached them the way he'd approached everything else, one step at a time, with determination and humility. His background gave him unique insights. During a medical ethics seminar, the professor posed a hypothetical: a pharmaceutical company has developed a life-saving drug but prices it beyond most people's reach. Discuss the ethical implications. His classmates debated abstracts. Daniel spoke about reality, about choosing between Lily's medication and food, about families destroyed by medical debt, about Victor Hayes' transformation from predator to philanthropist. "It's not a hypothetical for millions of Americans," he said. "It's daily reality. And until we acknowledge that we're not really practicing medicine, we're just treating the privileged." His professor, Dr. Hernandez, kept him after class. "You're going to make waves in this field, Mr. Carter." "I just want to make a difference." Same thing often enough. The foundation continued to grow. Victor had recruited other reformed executives, creating a network of former pharmaceutical leaders working to undo their own damage. The Second Chances Medical Foundation had become a movement with chapters in 12 states. Daniel remained on the board, attending meetings between classes, offering ground-level perspective to policy discussions. During one heated debate about expansion strategies, he interrupted the financial projections with a simple question. Who does this help? The room fell silent. Every decision should answer that question first. He continued, not is it profitable or is it sustainable, but who does this help and how? If we can't answer that clearly, we're losing our way. Victor backed him immediately. Daniel's right. We're not a corporation. We're a lifeline. Every spreadsheet represents families like his. Never forget that. One evening, studying late in the medical library, Daniel received an unexpected call. It was Robert Chen, Amy's father. Daniel, I need your help. Amy's been accepted to Stanford after all. They've created an adaptive swimming program, and she could still compete. But she's refusing to go. Why? Marcus. She says she can't leave until his rehabilitation is complete, that she made a commitment. Daniel understood. Amy had transformed her trauma into purpose, but that purpose had become a cage. He visited Amy the next day, finding her at the pool where she trained. She moved through the water with grace that her wheelchair couldn't match, powerful and free. Your dad says you're turning down Stanford. Amy pulled herself onto the pool edge. Marcus needs consistency. The program needs me. No, Daniel said gently. The program needs to exist beyond any one person, even you. But I promised. You promised to help him transform. You've done that. Now it's time for both of you to move forward. It feels like abandoning him. It feels like healing. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting or abandoning. It means carrying the lessons forward into new chapters. Amy was quiet, processing. You left the courthouse, left all the people you were helping. And I'm helping more people now in different ways. Tom Washington is doing amazing work in my place. The program is stronger because it doesn't depend on me anymore. What if Marcus relapses without me? Then he relapses, but that's his journey, not yours. You can't live your life as someone else's guardian angel. That evening, Daniel brought Amy and Marcus together at the foundation office. The conversation was difficult but necessary. I want you to go to Stanford, Marcus said before Amy could speak. I need you to go. Why? Because if you don't, then what I did to you keeps taking things away. Your swimming, your education, your future. I can't carry that. Amy started crying. But the program will continue, with or without us. Daniel's right, it's bigger than any individual now. They hugged carefully because of Marcus's still healing injuries, and Daniel saw something release in both of them. The strange bond forged by trauma was evolving into something healthier. Stay in touch, Amy said. Tell me about your speeches, your progress. Watch for me on the news, Marcus replied with a slight smile. When I graduate, when I get a job, when I make something of myself, I want you to see that your faith wasn't wasted. The seasons changed, and with them Daniel's life continued its transformation. He excelled in his studies, particularly in community health and medical ethics. His professors began inviting him to speak at conferences, sharing his unique perspective on healthcare inequality. One conference in Chicago changed everything. He was on a panel about pharmaceutical pricing when a woman in the audience stood up during Q&A. My husband died last month, she said, voice shaking. Couldn't afford insulin, rationed it until his body gave out. You talk about reform, but people are dying now, today. What do we do today? The other panelists offered policy prescriptions and long-term solutions. Daniel stood up, left the stage, and walked to the woman. What's your name? He asked gently. Patricia. Patricia Morrison. Patricia, I'm sorry about your husband. The system failed him, and that's unforgivable. But you're right, policy doesn't help today. He pulled out his phone. There's a foundation that provides emergency medication assistance. Let me connect you right now. He spent the rest of the conference session helping Patricia navigate the foundation's emergency resources, finding immediate help for others in her situation. The other panelists watched, somewhat embarrassed by their own detachment from immediate human need. Dr. Hernandez, who'd been in the audience, approached him afterward. That's why we need you in this field, Daniel. You never forget the human element. It's all that really matters, Daniel replied. Everything else is just paperwork. His actions at the conference led to an unexpected opportunity. The World Health Organization was launching a new initiative on healthcare accessibility in developing nations. They wanted Daniel to join a fact-finding mission to Guatemala, studying how communities managed healthcare without infrastructure. It's 2 weeks during summer break, Dr. Hernandez explained. It would count toward your international health requirement. Daniel's first thought was Lily. 2 weeks away from her felt impossible. But Lily, now 11 and impossibly wise, made the decision for him. Daddy, you have to go. Other kids need help too. I'll be fine with Mrs. Rodriguez. 2 weeks is a long time. You were shot and in the hospital for 3 weeks. I survived that. He couldn't argue with her logic. Guatemala was a revelation. In mountain villages without running water, he found community health workers performing miracles with basic supplies and deep knowledge. He watched a midwife save a mother and baby with techniques that required no technology, only skill and intuition. This is medicine, she told him through a translator. Not machines and expensive drugs, but understanding the body, the spirit, the community. He thought of American hospitals with million-dollar machines and patients dying from rationed insulin. The contrast was devastating. In one village, he met a boy with a heart condition similar to Lily's. Without surgery, without medication, the child wouldn't survive to adolescence. The family knew this, accepted it with a fatalism that broke Daniel's heart. That night he called Victor Hayes. There's a boy here, heart condition. He'll die without help. Send me the details. We'll arrange transportation, surgery, everything. Victor, there are thousands like him. Then we save who we can and fight to change the system that creates this inequality. It's all we can do. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Daniel realized that individual acts of grace, while vital, couldn't address systemic failure. Real change required something bigger. He returned from Guatemala with a new sense of purpose. His residency was approaching. Most students were competing for prestigious hospitals seeking specialty training that would guarantee high incomes. Daniel chose differently. He applied to a community health program in the Bronx, one of the most underserved areas in New York. His advisors tried to dissuade him. You're brilliant, Daniel. You could do pediatric cardiology, help kids like your daughter at the best hospitals. I can help more kids by addressing the system that makes healthcare inaccessible to families like mine was. The night before his residency began, Daniel sat with Lily in their small apartment. She was doing homework, he was reviewing patient charts. The comfortable silence between them was broken by her sudden question. Do you think Mom would be proud? Daniel set down his charts. Of what? Of us. Of who we've become. He thought about Maria, about the dreams they'd shared in this very apartment. They'd imagined Lily's future, but never this future. Never imagined Daniel as anything more than a laborer trying to get by. I think she'd be amazed, he said honestly, but not surprised. She always saw more in me than I saw in myself. Like how you see more in everyone else. Maybe that's her gift to us, the ability to see potential where others see problems. The Bronx Community Health Center was a world away from the gleaming hospitals where his classmates had gone. Paint peeled from waiting room walls, equipment was outdated by decades, and the staff looked perpetually exhausted. But Daniel saw something else in those cramped corridors. He saw home, saw the people he'd been invisible among for so many years, now visible and needing care. His first patient was Rosa Gutierrez, 63 years old, diabetic, speaking only Spanish. The previous resident had prescribed insulin she couldn't afford and dietary changes she couldn't make living in a food desert. Daniel sat with her for an hour using his broken Spanish and her broken English to build a bridge. No money for medicine, she said, tears in her eyes. Choose food or medicine. Always choose food for grandchildren. Daniel pulled out his phone, connected her to the Foundation's emergency program on the spot. Then he spent another hour helping her find a community garden, a food bank with fresh vegetables, a support group at the local church. Medicine was more than prescriptions. It was solving the whole problem. His supervising physician, Dr. Janet Kim, watched from the doorway. You can't spend that much time with every patient, Carter. We see 40 people a day here. Then the system needs to change. The system is what it is. We work within it, or we break it and build something better. Dr. Kim studied him with eyes that had seen too much. That idealism will burn out within 6 months. But 6 months passed, then a year, and Daniel's flame only grew brighter. He started arriving at 5 a.m. to see patients who couldn't miss work for appointments. He organized weekend clinics and housing projects, bringing medicine to people who couldn't travel. He wrote grants during his few free hours, securing funding for a mobile clinic. Lily watched her father transform medicine the way he'd transformed justice, one person at a time, one act of stubborn compassion after another. She was 14 now in high school, her heart condition stable, but always present. She'd inherited his sense of justice and her mother's fierce intelligence. "Dad, I want to help at the clinic," she announced one evening. "You have school homework. I have weekends, and I speak Spanish better than you do." She grinned. "Mrs. Rodriguez has been teaching me for years. Let me translate file papers, do something useful." Daniel wanted to protect her from the harsh realities he faced daily, but he also knew she'd already lived through harsh realities. She'd earned the right to help. That Saturday, Lily became the clinic's youngest volunteer. She translated conversations played with children in the waiting room and somehow made even the most frightened patients smile. One elderly man, after she'd helped explain his medication regimen in Spanish, called her Pequeña Ángel, little angel. "She gets that from her mother," Daniel told Dr. Kim. "No," his supervisor replied, watching Lily comfort a crying toddler. "That compassion is learned. You taught her that." The mobile clinic launched on a cold February morning. A converted RV equipped with basic diagnostic tools and medications, it was modest but revolutionary. Daniel drove it himself, parking outside homeless shelters, in church parking lots, beneath highway overpasses where the forgotten gathered. On the third day, he treated a man whose face looked familiar. It took a moment to recognize him, James Brennan, the man who'd nearly lost custody of his son in Judge Sloan's courthouse years ago. "Mr. Brennan," the man looked up ashamed. "Officer Carter. Dr. Carter now, I heard." "What happened?" Brennan's story was depressingly common. Lost his job again. Drinking, returned, family left, street became home. Classic spiral that Daniel had seen too many times. "I was doing better," Brennan said, pulling his coat tighter. 18 months sober. Then my boy got sick leukemia. Insurance wouldn't cover the experimental treatment. I started working 3 jobs, wasn't there when he needed me, wife left with him, and I just gave up. Daniel examined him, malnutrition, early-stage liver disease, infected wound on his leg that could turn septic. But what struck him most was the familiar despair in Brennan's eyes. "Your son, is he getting treatment?" "His stepfather's insurance covers it. He's got a better dad now." "No," Daniel said firmly. "He's got a different dad. Not better. You're still his father. A worthless father. A father who worked 3 jobs trying to save him. That's not worthless, that's love." Daniel treated the wound, prescribed antibiotics the clinic would provide free, and then did something else. He called Victor Hayes. "There's a man here whose son needs experimental leukemia treatment. Insurance issues. Send me the information, we'll handle it." "Victor, we can't save everyone individually." "No, but we can save this one. Today. That matters." Within a week, Brennan's son was enrolled in the treatment program, fully funded. The boy's mother, shocked by the intervention, agreed to supervised visits. Brennan, given a reason to fight, entered rehab again. "Why?" he asked Daniel during a follow-up appointment. "Why help me?" "Because someone helped me once when I was desperate. Because your son needs his father, even a flawed one. Because second chances shouldn't depend on bank accounts." The mobile clinic gained attention. Media picked up the story of the doctor who'd once been a janitor, who'd been shot saving a CEO who was now bringing medicine to the streets. Donations poured in, enough for a second mobile unit, then a third. But with attention came opposition. Insurance companies complained about unfair competition. Some hospitals argued the mobile clinics were providing substandard care. A consortium of private practices claimed Daniel was undermining the healthcare system. The attacks became personal. Someone leaked that Lily had a heart condition, suggesting Daniel was using his position to secure preferential treatment for her. Never mind that she'd been stable for years, that her medication was paid through the foundation like thousands of others. One evening, Daniel came home to find Lily crying over her laptop. "They're saying horrible things about you online, Dad. That you're a fraud, that you're just trying to get famous." Daniel sat beside her, closing the laptop gently. "People attack what threatens them. and we're threatening a system that profits from suffering. But it's not fair. No, it's not. But remember what I've always told you, we don't do the right thing because it's easy, or because people will thank us. We do it because it's right. The next day brought worse news. The city was attempting to shut down the mobile clinics, citing regulatory violations. The violations were technicalities, paperwork issues that could normally be resolved with a fine. But someone was pushing for complete shutdown. Daniel called Judge Sloan, now retired but still influential. They're trying to destroy everything we've built. Then we fight, she said simply. I'll make some calls. You keep those clinics running. The legal battle was exhausting. Daniel spent days in court nights seeing patients weekends fighting paperwork. His residency supervisors warned him about burnout, but he couldn't stop. Too many people depended on those clinics. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Andrew Park, now released and working full-time with grieving families, had become an advocate for healthcare reform. He organized the families, hundreds of them, all touched by medical injustice, to protest at City Hall. Daniel Carter saved my life when I didn't deserve it, Andrew told the crowd. Now they're trying to destroy him for saving others. We won't let that happen. The protest grew. Amy Chen arrived from Stanford, walking with technological assistants she'd helped develop. Marcus came from his job as a youth counselor. Tom Washington brought court officers on their off hours. Even Victor Hayes, usually avoiding public appearances, stood with them. This isn't about one man or one program, Victor addressed the crowd. It's about deciding what kind of society we want to be. One that treats healthcare as a privilege for the wealthy, or one that recognizes it as a human right. The pressure worked. The city backed down, the clinics stayed open, and Daniel's work continued. But the victory felt hollow as he walked through the Bronx that night, seeing homeless encampments, growing addiction, ravaging communities, diseases that shouldn't exist in the richest nation on earth. His phone rang. Dr. Hernandez from Columbia. Daniel, I have a proposition. We're creating a new program, Community Medicine Institute, training doctors specifically for underserved populations, combining medical education with social justice. We want you to help design and teach it. I'm still a resident. You're already teaching us all. Make it official. Daniel thought about the young medical students who'd called him Dad, about Tom Washington now training others in restorative justice, about cycles of learning and teaching. Part-time, he said. I won't leave the clinics. We wouldn't want you to. The clinics will be our training ground. The institute launched with 15 students, all committed to serving marginalized communities. Daniel taught them medicine, but more importantly, he taught them to see. This patient isn't just diabetic, he'd say during rounds. She's diabetic because she lives in a food desert, works 2 jobs, so can't exercise, can't afford medication even with insurance. Treat the disease, but also treat the circumstances. One student, brilliant but sheltered, struggled with this approach. We're doctors, not social workers. We're healers, Daniel corrected, and you can't heal what you refuse to see. He took them to homeless camps, to prison medical wards, to neighborhoods where gunshots were background noise. Some couldn't handle it and transferred to traditional programs. But those who stayed became different kinds of doctors, warriors for health justice, rather than just practitioners. Lily, now 17, was preparing for college. Her essay topic, The Man Who Taught Me to See. She wrote about watching her father transform from invisible janitor to visible advocate, but more importantly about how he'd taught her to see the invisible, the homeless veteran. Everyone walked past the immigrant afraid to seek care, the child hiding bruises. My father once told me that heroes aren't fearless, she wrote. They're people who see another's pain and decide it matters as much as their own. He stepped in front of a gun to save someone who'd hurt families like ours. That act of grace rippled outward, creating waves of change that continue to grow. But the real heroism came in the daily choice to keep seeing, keep caring, keep fighting for those society prefers to ignore. She was accepted to Harvard on a full scholarship, planning to study public health and law. The night the acceptance came, Daniel found himself crying, not from sadness at her leaving, but from pride at who she'd become. You know what you've given me? Lily asked, sitting beside him. An example of what not to do, he tried to joke through tears. A legacy. Everywhere I go, I'll carry your lesson that everyone deserves to be seen, to be helped, to be valued. That's worth more than any inheritance. The graduation ceremony for Daniel's first class at the Community Medicine Institute coincided with a milestone. The mobile clinics had treated their 100,000th patient. Media coverage was extensive, but Daniel avoided most of it, uncomfortable with being portrayed as some kind of saint. "You're not a saint," Victor told him at the celebration. "You're something more important, proof that ordinary people can create extraordinary change." Andrew Park, now running a national network of grief support groups, agreed. "Saints are born special. You chose to become who you are. That's more inspiring." Even Marcus, who'd graduated college and was applying to law school wanting to become a public defender, weighed in. "You showed us that our worst moments don't define us, that we can choose to transform pain into purpose." But it was Judge Sloan, now in her 70s, but still sharp, who perhaps understood best. "You've created a new kind of justice, Daniel. Not legal justice, human justice. The recognition that we're all connected, all responsible for each other." That night, Daniel walked through the Bronx alone, thinking about the journey from that desperate morning when he'd calculated impossible bills to now. The problems hadn't disappeared. Poverty still crushed spirits. Illness still destroyed families. The system still favored wealth over worth. But something had shifted. In the courthouse, where he'd been invisible, Tom Washington now ran a restorative justice program that had become a national model. Where Andrew Park had pulled a gun in desperate rage, families now found support and healing. Where Victor Hayes had built an empire on suffering, a foundation now provided hope to thousands. And in a small apartment in the Bronx, a janitor's daughter was preparing to continue the fight, in her own way, carrying forward lessons learned from a father who'd chosen to see humanity where others saw problems. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Dad, watching the news about the clinics. They're calling you a hero again." He texted back, "Heroes are just people who make different choices. Anyone can be one." "Not anyone would have made your choices. Anyone can start making them now." He thought about his father's words so many years ago. The measure of a man isn't in how he treats his friends, but how he treats his enemies. He'd learned it went deeper. The measure was in how you treated those who couldn't help you, couldn't repay, you couldn't even thank you. A homeless woman approached, recognizing him from the clinic. "Doc Carter." "My insulin, it's working. Sugar's been stable for a month." "That's wonderful, Patricia. Keep taking it regularly. You remember my name?" "Everyone deserves to have their name remembered." She smiled, gap-toothed but genuine. "You saved my life." "You saved your own life by seeking help. I just made the medicine available." After she left, Daniel stood under the streetlight thinking about cycles. Violence bred violence, but kindness bred kindness. One moment of intervention, stepping in front of a gun, had created ripples that were still expanding. His phone rang. An unknown number, but he answered. "Dr. Carter, this is the World Health Organization. We've been following your work with mobile clinics and community medicine. We'd like to discuss implementing your model in refugee camps across Southeast Asia." Daniel thought about the boy in Guatemala with a heart condition like Lily's. How many more were out there, invisible to systems that only saw statistics? "I'm listening," he said. The proposal was ambitious, a year-long program training local healthcare workers in community-centered medicine, establishing mobile clinics in refugee camps, creating sustainable models that could continue without external support. "We need someone who understands medicine as more than just treating disease," the WHO representative explained. "Someone who sees the human element in humanitarian crisis. I have commitments here. We're not asking you to abandon them. 3-month rotations. Your team can handle the clinics while you're gone, and the experience you bring back will strengthen your work here." Daniel thought about Lily leaving for Harvard in 6 months. She'd be starting her own journey while he expanded his. That evening he discussed it with her over dinner, their tradition of Chinese takeout continuing despite everything that had changed. "You have to do it, Dad," she said immediately. "Think how many people you could help." 3 months is a long time to be away. "I'll be at college anyway, and imagine my dad saving the world." She grinned. "Well, more of the world. I'm not saving anything, just trying to help where I can. That's all any of us can do." The news of Daniel's WHO appointment sparked another media cycle, but also something more valuable inspired others to act. Medical students started choosing community health residencies in record numbers. The mobile clinic model was replicated in 20 cities. The Community Medicine Institute received funding to expand nationally. At his farewell gathering before the first WHO rotation, the room was packed with faces from every chapter of his journey. Judge Sloan, now walking with a cane, but spirit undimmed. Tom Washington, who'd become director of the courthouse's restorative justice program. Amy Chen, who'd graduated Stanford and was working on adaptive technologies for disabled athletes. Marcus accepted to law school determined to defend those who couldn't afford justice. Andrew Park, whose grief counseling network had helped thousands find purpose in pain. And Victor Hayes, who'd lost a fortune but gained something immeasurable: redemption. "I want to say something," Victor announced, commanding attention as he once had in boardrooms. "Daniel Carter saved my life, but more importantly, he saved my soul. He showed me that wealth means nothing if it's built on others' suffering. That power is only valuable when used to lift others up. Every life my foundation saves, every family that receives medication they couldn't afford, that's Daniel's true legacy." Andrew Park spoke next. "I tried to commit murder because grief drove me insane. Daniel stopped me, forgave me, then helped me transform that grief into purpose. I've counseled hundreds of people on the edge of violence. Every one I pull back from that edge is because he pulled me back first." Amy Chen stood carefully, her technological assist almost invisible now. "People see me walking and think technology saved me. But what really saved me was learning from Daniel that healing isn't about returning to who you were, it's about becoming who you're meant to be." Even Tom Washington, usually quiet, spoke up. "I was invisible like Daniel was. Mopping floors, dreaming of more but not believing it possible. He showed me that invisible people can become visible through their actions, their choices, their refusal to accept that this is just how things are." Judge Sloan went last. "In 25 years on the bench, I thought I understood justice. Daniel taught me I only understood law. Justice is messier, more complex, more human. It's not about punishment or even fairness. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and acting accordingly." Daniel stood overwhelmed by the testimonies. "Every person in this room changed me as much as I might have changed them. We're all connected, all part of each other's stories. That's what I'll carry with me to the refugee camps. The knowledge that a single act of grace can ripple outward, creating waves of change we never imagined." Lily hugged him then in front of everyone. "Mom would be so proud," she whispered. "She's the one who saw this in me," Daniel whispered back. "I'm just trying to live up to her vision." The night before leaving for his first WHO mission, Daniel walked through the city one more time, past the courthouse where he'd been invisible, past the hospital where he'd recovered from a gunshot, past the mobile clinic sites where thousands had received care, past the community center where the restorative justice program flourished. At each stop he saw ghosts of himself, the desperate janitor, the wounded hero, the unlikely mediator, the determined student, the community doctor. Each version had led to the next, a evolution born from one moment of choosing to see humanity where others saw none. His phone buzzed with a message from a number he didn't recognize. "Dr. Carter, you don't know me, but my son was one of the boys who attacked Marcus years ago. You arranged for his counseling instead of just prison. He's graduating high school next month, accepted to college, wants to be a social worker. I wanted you to know your intervention saved him from becoming a statistic. Thank you." Daniel smiled, adding another ripple to the ever-expanding circle of change. Tomorrow he'd fly to Bangladesh to refugee camps where hundreds of thousands lived in conditions that would break most spirits. But he'd carry with him the lessons learned in courthouse hallways and hospital wards that everyone deserved to be seen, to be helped, to be valued. Standing on his fire escape one last time before the journey, looking out at the city lights, Daniel thought about his father's words. "The measure of a man isn't in how he treats his friends, but how he treats his enemies." He'd learned something more. The measure was in recognizing there were no enemies, only fellow humans struggling with pain, making choices from desperation or indifference, capable of transformation when shown a different path. Lily joined him on the fire escape, both of them silent in comfortable companionship. "You know what I realized," she finally said. "That morning when you stepped in front of the gun, you weren't trying to be a hero. You were just trying to be human." "That's all any of us can do," Daniel replied. Be human, see others as human, and act accordingly. Simple but not easy. The most important things never are. They stood together, father and daughter, looking out at a city full of invisible people waiting to be seen, wounds waiting to be healed, stories waiting to be transformed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose grace over vengeance, compassion over indifference. But tonight they simply stood together. Two people who'd learned that the distance between janitor and doctor, between criminal and counselor, between invisible and seen, was just one choice. The choice to recognize humanity in ourselves and others, and to act on that recognition. The city hummed below them, millions of lives intersecting, each carrying the potential for transformation. And somewhere in those intersections, Daniel knew other moments of grace were occurring, small acts of courage, rippling outward, changing trajectories, saving lives in ways that would never make headlines but would matter immensely to those they touched.